What is going on, everybody? Nick from Resonix here. We have another interesting long form video that I think is going to be very helpful for a lot of people. This is going to be the first video in a little series that I think I'm going to start doing. And what that series is going to be is, I didn't even think of what I'm going to call it yet. But essentially what it's going to be is, I get a lot of questions from people, and what they usually stem from isn't just from their own curiosity out of nowhere. It usually stems from them reading something or seeing some other discussion online, and they have some questions about it, or they have some misunderstandings about it that they want cleared up, or they ask themselves and they get 100 different answers. And essentially what I'm going to do is go through some of those, crazy discussions where there's nothing but misinformation from people who don't even have firsthand experience or even the knowledge to back it up. And they just parrot around, bullshit information that doesn't really help anybody. And this first video is going to be on front subwoofers. And why they are beneficial in many different installations. We're not going to get into how to properly install them or how to fabricate them. That could be for something else. I'm sure Peter from PS Sound has plenty of videos that show you how to do something like that. What we're going to do is break down a discussion that was going on in a internet forum on DIY mobile audio, and just break down the discussion. And there's various different comments and claims and suggestions and blah blah blah, and I'm going to break it down, and I'm also going to back it with data. I have plenty of different measurements here, and we are going to have some fun with this one. So like I said, it's going to be a discussion on installing a front sub, or not installing it, but like why it's beneficial in most installations. But before we actually get into that part, let's look at what the discussion is, because it actually originally started as nothing to do directly with front subs, but it has everything to do with why a front sub is beneficial. And this thread is on this, it's this right here. First time with a sealed mid-bass enclosure. Holy smokes. And it's like, yeah, cool. Sealed mid-bass enclosures are great. They help reduce resonance, which reduces distortion, which can improve overall performance. That's pretty easy to understand. And someone sent me this thread, trying to get some understanding about some of the discussion going on. And I was like, all right, yeah, cool, like sealed mid. And then I started reading, and I realized this person put the mid-bass driver in the OEM enclosure that's behind the door panel. To me, I know pretty much all of these people in this thread, at least to some degree. And before we get into this, I just want to say, I am not talking shit about anybody. I am not saying anyone is stupid or dumb or ignorant. Or actually, maybe I am saying people are ignorant. That is what I'm saying. Ignorance, the definition of ignorance is just not having an understanding on a given topic. And there's a lot of discussion going on in this thread that I find very ignorant, because it's a lot of people that just don't have the firsthand experience, but are putting things out there into the conversation as if it's 100% concrete and factual. And it's starting out, Jimmy, I love you, but I'm going to call you out for a second. It's starting out with someone saying they're super impressed with the OEM plastic door enclosures in an Audi, and this is their best mid-bass they've ever had, using a Dynaudio Essitar 6.5 inch Dynaudio Essitar, which is not a beefy mid-bass driver or an output capable mid-bass driver by any stretch of the means. You had me with the title, but then as soon as I started reading, it's the OEM enclosure, which is flimsy plastic which you can see right here. This is the, I'm pretty sure this is the mid-bass enclosure that is in the RS6 Avant. If that's not it, you know, it's one of these types of enclosures. It's very thin, you know, mold injected plastic. It's very resonant, you know, and I know he did some sound deadening on it, but this actually, believe it or not, the enclosure itself is not the problem I have. It's the fact that it's still behind the factory door panel, which he said in here that he did it, you know, you didn't do too much deadening, you did some, but like the door panel itself is the most resonant part of a door that is going to contribute to distortion from your mid-bass drivers. And I talk about that in my guide, in my buyer's guide. We could see here, you know, outer door skin and door panel are the most important. We can see it in the how to sound deadening a car door, where in the general synopsis, first thing I say, door panel is what I usually worry about most when we're in the door panel section. And I say it in my videos. I've said it multiple places. The door panel itself is going to contribute the most amount of distortion caused by resonance from a car door, and it is the most important aspect to treat, period. I could say with 99% certainty that there is no exception to that. I can't think of a single car that I've worked on where the door panel wasn't the worst offender on a modern vehicle, that is. You know, we're not talking about older vehicles where like the door panel is perfectly flat and like perfectly mated up to the inner door skin. Talking about modern, you know, plastic door panels. But anyways, this conversation, you know, evolved into something different. I'm not going to read you guys this whole thread. You guys can search it on your own and read it if you want. I'll put it in the description of this YouTube video. But, you know, let's see what this is. The results make sense. Assume your door cards and other related resonance are greatly reduced as well. This is what I'm talking about. Like, you know, just because there's a door enclosure inside of the door doesn't mean that the energy being created by the speaker itself isn't being transferred into the door panel. An enclosure doesn't necessarily change that if it's behind the door panel. You know, I have 0 resonances from your doors, first time ever. Honestly, this is not very confidence inspiring considering, again, it's still behind the most resonant part of the door. All this tells me is this is the best situation you've had with doors, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have 0 resonance. I promise you, you still have resonance if you didn't treat your door panels. At least treat them very well. You know, I know, again, you probably treated them with a little bit of something like you said, but you're not stopping the amount of energy. Now, the Audi RS6 that he is doing here, it does have very solid door panels. So he, you know, this user does have a very good head start where it's not held in with panel clips. It's actually held in with hooks like Porsche uses. It creates a very stable door panel. So it's off to a better start with that, but not super solid. At the end of the day, it's still a plastic door panel. But let's really get into it. Blah, 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 blah. You know, true IB mid-bass mounted against a fire doesn't even take a big 8-inch driver. You know, as you found a 6.5-inch driver in a proper sealed enclosure will be amazing. I'm putting mid-bass in the doors just to get my system going, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, the thing is, like I've said before, car audio is a balance of many, many different things. It is a balance of equipment selection, you know, system design, speaker location. It is a balance of reducing resonances and rattles and distortions. It is a balance of, you know, balancing equipment against each other so it all makes sense. It is a balance of OEM integration, tuning, reflections, tuning, blah, 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 blah. Like it's a very delicate, I guess you could say, ecosystem. And if you throw one thing off, it can ruin everything. And that's kind of where my argument for a front subwoofer comes in. Now, there's actually, heads up, there's a lot of good information in this discussion here from, you know, this user. I don't really know him too well. I've spoken to him a few times in the past. He's very, very knowledgeable about building subwoofers and their TS parameters and how they, really work and what it really does. If this person's talking about subwoofers, I'm going to tell you right now, listen to him, period. He knows what he's doing. And he's explaining in here, various things. Again, isn't really the point of the video. And we have this guy here who, frankly, is always the loudest one in the room and very clearly doesn't have much firsthand experience, but he loves to join the conversation. And I, for once, actually kind of agree with him, whether this is regurgitated information or not. Like, he's pretty much spot on. He's still not a believer of any mid-bass being able to outperform a front sub in output. Yeah, I mean, this one should be obvious, in output being the disclaimer here. Until I see some measurements proving blah, 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 blah. There is never a need for a front sub if tuned properly to begin with. I get that. Actually, I disagree. Remember, we don't need any car audio system, but if we're talking about getting a very accurate sounding car audio system, let's just pretend like that's a need, that's the goal. Then I would say in most situations, you really do either need a front subwoofer or some very extreme kick panels or door enclosures with very specific circumstances. Like the example of very specific circumstances, like the tune I did in the last video for the guy Greg with the Subaru. For some reason, he didn't have any of the cancellation in the lower mid bass like we're about to talk about. So that would be a situation where if he did do a very good job of sound deadening his doors and, he didn't really get any resonance from his doors, he would probably be able to get away without a front subwoofer and have a really, really good sounding system. But this is not normal. It's very rare to have that situation. And he goes on, again, I'm not gonna read all of this, but I promise you your dynes will not outperform my GB10 set frequency range. Yeah, run a front sub for pure impact and output without introducing distortion into the mid basses. Now, again, this is part of the reason why. Picture a 6.5-inch driver, or picture two 6.5-inch drivers. Even without the door in the picture, most 6.5-inch drivers are going to have a resonant frequency around 50 to 70 hertz, and they're going to have, maybe 5 millimeters of X max. Playing these lower mid bass frequencies with authority is pushing them to their limits where you're raising distortion a lot. But for a 10-inch subwoofer, especially one that has low distortion and can play high enough, that's going to be absolutely nothing, and distortion is going to be very minimal in comparison. That's just one little tidbit, again, before we get into the actual tricky part, which is the car itself. I just want to read this again really quick. A front sub will never replace the need for mid bass. No, well, actually, I disagree. I've done that before. Actually, a few people have done that before, and it can work pretty well if done correctly. Anyways, but when properly working with each other, hold on, blah, 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 blah. All right, this is where things get interesting. As mentioned, my reasons for not wanting a front subwoofer are: 1, I don't want to sacrifice the footwell area, just personal preference. I totally get that. 2, I think they look bad in a vehicle, but that's coming from a guy who prioritizes stealth. I totally get that as well. But I'm going to be honest with you, in most modern vehicles, neither of these should be a problem in most situations, at least if you have decent fabrication skills. Example, this is my car. This is the factory carpet, and there is a 12-inch subwoofer behind this, and I didn't lose a single inch of foot space. In most cars, all that's going on back here is a bunch of foam behind the carpet. If, you can get that foam out of there, you're willing to cut the carpet a little bit behind the floor mats, like you can usually fit a front subwoofer without really losing any foot space and without really making it look like anything that's not factory. And I know this is just one example, I know, but there's countless examples where people have done it without you even knowing. Porsche 911s, people do it all the time in plenty of different cars. Again, you go to Peter from PS Sounds YouTube channel, you'll see plenty of front subwoofers where it's like there's not much room taken up. Anyways, let's more so get into it. This is where it starts getting interesting. I don't doubt the impact a front sub might have, but my experience has been, now in parentheses, with the exception of one properly tuned vehicle, that a front sub pulls the stage out of whack. Guys get all hot and frothy because they have wicked bass up front, but it so obviously pulls down the stage. Oh boy. Remember 2 minutes ago when I was talking about how, and in the last video, where we were going over the two different tunes about, in Greg's Subaru, where I mentioned, door panels being the most resonant and distortion adding part of a vehicle. To me, again, Jimmy, I love you. I'm sorry, but this is insane. This is absolutely insane to say. To say that a front subwoofer will throw your stage out of whack and pull it down when it's mounted to the firewall and floor and kick panel, which are some of the most structural and non-resonant parts of a vehicle. Meanwhile, you're telling people that your door mid-bass drivers are, much better. Look, I'm the first guy to say you don't have to do kicks, you don't cut your car, blah, blah, blah. Like, you can get good mid-bass out of doors. I'm the first guy to say that. But this is absolutely insane, okay? More reasons than just the resonance of the door panel. But continuing with it, again, the resonance of the door panel is gonna add so much more distortion than anything that's gonna be in your passenger footwell unless you completely fuck up your front sub to a point that's like inconceivable. Like you would have to try to make your front sub install bad enough to where even with a halfway decent tune, like it would make itself stand out. That's just insanity. But the resonance, the resonant cues that the door panels and the doors are gonna give you are gonna cause, again, impulse response issues where it's throwing everything out of whack, and it's gonna give your ears and brain something to latch onto to figure out the location of that sound. So to say that a front sub is pulling your stage down or stage out of whack, I'm gonna just tell you this, with the exception of one properly tuned vehicle, the other ones you must have heard must have been absolutely fucking horrific for that to be the case. Like horrific for that to be the case. It's so easy to get a front subwoofer set up sounding halfway decently. Like it's so goddamn easy. But let's keep going. My forum boner comment is more in light of the fact that everyone seems to be jumping on this bandwagon, but has no idea how to properly tune their system to implement it. Jimmy, number one, you don't even tune your own system. Stop it. Number two, sometimes, there are plenty of forum boners and there are plenty of bandwagon jumping things that don't need to be going on. But have you ever sat there and thought, well, why is it a forum boner? Why are people jumping on this bandwagon? And that's what we're going to get into with a bunch of the data that I have here. But let's keep going down a little bit. Let's see what we've got. I forget where things start getting interesting. I didn't prepare myself for this as much as I probably should have. I probably should have somehow put like Post-it notes on what posts I need to reference, and I haven't. I started off my build with proper size door enclosures for M99s. End of story. Okay, like, dude, you're taking from such a small fucking sample pool. Stop it. All right, I think this is where things start getting interesting. Being inspired by PS Sound video, built silly enclosures in the doors. But here's the thing. I'm not even gonna read the rest of this. I'm just gonna show you this. I'm gonna try to zoom in here. You see, even with the sealed enclosures, you can see the exact problem that door-mounted mid-bass drivers have regardless of the resonance. Now we already talked about resonance and the distortion it causes and how it draws your ears and brain as location cues. We beat it to death. Let's move on from it. Now we're going to talk about the frequency response and the phase response of this location. Almost every vehicle on the on the driver's side door-mounted mid-bass driver is going to have a cancellation pretty much dead smack in the middle of like your typical subwoofer to mid-bass crossover region in the 70 to 90 hertz area. And you can see it right here. Again, this guy is saying, he built solid, door enclosures. And guess what? He still has this cancellation, and that's the exact thing. And it's not just a frequency response cancellation that you can fix. We're going to get into more of the data in a little bit that explains why this dip isn't fixable and why front subwoofers really save the day here. Let me just see if there's anything else he says that really set gains, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, he doesn't even realize like what's going on here. Yeah, sure. Doing door-mounted enclosures are going to, and in front of the door panel, not utilizing a door panel over it, is going to greatly reduce the amount of resonance that the door panel is going to have, which lowers distortion. But it doesn't fix the issue with the location itself of the speaker inside of the cabin and the issues that it has. And again, you can see it right here. This green trace, I guarantee you, this is the, green, left mid-bass. Cancellation right there, much lower in output than the passenger side, which typically doesn't have this issue, but it'll have it around like the 120 hertz, 100 hertz, 150 hertz area. Again, it comes down to the size of the car. You can't really predict 100% unless you break out a tape measure and start doing some math, but it depends on the width of the vehicle that causes this cancellation. And what this cancellation is the sound radiating from the driver's side mid-bass, going across the car, reflecting off of the other side of the car, back to the original side, and then reflecting again. And this frequency is the one that's perfectly out of phase now with the initial signal from that speaker. And you know what? Aaron Hardison, Aaron's Audio Corner, has a perfect video on this as well that he made 4 years ago. How using a subwoofer to improve mid-bass in your car audio system. And you can see it right here. Left mid-bass, near side null. You see it right here, right at the 85 to 70 hertz area. There is a cancellation that is 100% not fixable. And why it is not fixable is because it's in a non-minimum phase area where it's a reflection that is completely destructive. It's not just a dip that's like surrounded by peaks that's usually in the mid-range area. Higher frequencies, like usually you can boost those back without issue. But like once you start getting into crazy cancellation that's lower in frequency and the wavelengths are long relative to the size of the cabin, those are the ones you typically cannot fix. And that is where, again, a front sub can take care of it. By the way, I'm going to include this video's link in the notes. I highly suggest watching it. The one problem here is Aaron, it's not really a problem. It's just Aaron doesn't talk about using a front sub in this video. But I will continue this and show you why it can help your rear subwoofer as well. And again, your mid-bass as well. We'll get into that in a bit. But yeah, so let's see. Oh, look at that. I pulled some old raw data from my mid-bass to compare. It looks pretty similar in response. I think the biggest benefit from sealed is playing at volume with no resonance that destroys staging. Exactly. This is exactly what I'm talking about. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't fix the cancellation from the cabin itself. So let's keep going on. All right. So this is my buddy here that actually sent me this discussion and asked me. So this is actually one of my former employees that used to work for me at Apicella Auto Sound. And I've been helping him a lot and teaching him a lot about, tuning and sound ending and OEM integration over the years. And, he was the one that originally sent me this thread out of a few people and was like, hey, weren't you teaching me about front sub and like how it works and blah, blah, blah. And it's, I love this. My experience has been that, and he's, this person is quoting the maker of this thread, I think, my experience has been that folks typically do a shitty job of tuning their vehicles in the first place. They don't, or don't know how to, bring the rear sub in phase with their front mid bass, so the impact is not what it potentially could/should be. Then they immediately think, I'll chuck in a front sub to compensate. Their lack of tuning skills only compound the issue by adding a front sub. It rarely sounds better. Again, I fully disagree here. Tuning, and this kind of actually relates to my argument that three-way is easier to tune than a two-way front setup. It's that having compartmentalized areas that are more specialized in a specific bandwidth, you can do more with that and get a better end result. And it's no different here. Dialing in phase is not difficult, but you know what is difficult, or actually impossible? Dialing in phase when there is no phase to really dial in, because the cancellation is so much that they're quite literally, it's just total cancellation. There's nothing there. You can't get something in phase if there's nothing there. And it just so happens to be that in your pretty much almost every vehicle, most vehicles, the crossover, in most vehicles, the range where we want to cross over a sub to mid bass around 80 hertz is exactly where two of these cancellations lie. And it's like, you can't get them in phase sometimes, even with the best install, even with the best tuning, even with the best equipment, even with mid bass enclosures. It doesn't matter. You are not going to be able to revive it. And again, my buddy here sums it up fucking perfectly. And it goes into a discussion. This is actually really funny, considering this is actually a person whose car I remotely tuned the other day and how happy he was with the end result. And he's talking about, tuning. Sorry, but you too. I'm going to call you out a little bit here. But honestly, if you feel you need a front sub due to phase and frequency response issues, then you don't have enough tuning knowledge to fix it without adding a front sub. Dude, you literally just paid me $800 to tune your car from 1,000 miles away. Stop it. Love you, but stop it. We still have to finish it, by the way, because your car died. But anyways, I'm going to show you why this is not true. I know I've been talking about it for probably 15 to 20 minutes now, but I'm going to show you right now. So I have multiple different vehicles measurements on hand. I have my personal car, which is the 2019 Volvo S60. I have a customer's car, which is a Ram 1500. I have another customer's car, which is an F250. And I actually have another Ram 1500 where Jeffrey Hall of Total Tuning was kind enough to donate some further measurements to me, because I realized I didn't have the correct measurements saved on my computer at home here, and he was able to send me something comparable right before I started filming this video. So thank you, Jeff. Love you. So let's get into it. We're going to start with my car. Now, when I do tuning, I'll give you a little rundown really quickly about how I do my tuning. I start with measurements with no EQ and extended crossovers, meaning I will cross everything over super wide and let everything overlap. Like tweeters will play down to like 2,000. Mid ranges will be, 180 to 5,000. Mid basses will be 60 to 800. Front sub will be 0 to 200. Rear sub will be 0 to 100, something like that. And then from there, I determine, okay, where am I going to select my crossover points, blah, blah, blah. And here is my vehicle. We have, the, let's go, left mid bass. We have front subwoofer. We have rear subwoofer, all with no equalization. Now, I can tell you firsthand, I know my car like the back of my hand. This tune was from a while ago, but just looking at this measurement, I know exactly where this crossover is. This is with an 80 hertz crossover with no equalization. This is with the mid bass driver in the door. This is before I did kick panels. But this door, you can ask pretty much anyone who's heard this car when it still had the mid basses in the door. This is one of those rare exceptions where people would agree, like, oh yeah, you can get really good mid bass out of doors. I did a really good job of sound deadening them, obviously, and my door panels, just like Jimmy's RS6, my door panels are very solid from the factory in the way that they hook on instead of clip on. Doors that can hook on instead of clipping on can be much more solid because you could put much more pressure behind them with decouplers than you can on doors with panel clips. But anyways, that's a different discussion. We can see right here, I'm gonna get rid of these. We can see right here, this is my driver's side mid bass, crossed at 80 hertz up to 500 hertz or 400 hertz. And sure enough, we have this cancellation dead smack right at 80 hertz, right where we would cross over a subwoofer if there was no front sub. With, sure, if you went with like big beefy mid bass drivers, you can cross lower, but then there's still a couple of problems. It doesn't get rid of this cancellation because that cancellation isn't caused by the speaker itself. It is caused by its location inside of the room. The dimensions of the room and the speaker's location inside of the room determine these cancellations at very low frequencies. And at high frequencies as well, but it's more prominent at lower frequencies. And again, it's not just a frequency response dip. It's caused by such a severe cancellation that phase gets completely fucked to hell and back. And I'll show you. This is where Jeff's measurements are gonna come in. Let me see. Right here is a perfect one. Actually, you know what? Maybe we'll save that for the next car because this is the same RAM 1500 that I have. So yeah, we'll save that one. But just keep in mind, again, with these cancellations comes really bad phase response that cannot be worked with. And we'll get into it. But here's the rear subwoofer. And sure enough, dead smack also in the crossover area is another big cancellation. And almost every average vehicle has this same one around the 60 to 70 hertz area. So here you are, I'm gonna do my standard, nice three-way car audio system, three-way up front, sub in the rear. And oh man, I'm using big beefy 8-inch mid-bass drivers that I'm really excited for. I did all the craziest sound deadening in the world. And you get it in and you start tuning it and boom, you have cancellations right where they're supposed to cross over. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's not like, it's not like the sub is canceling at 100 hertz and the mid bass is canceling at like 60 hertz where you can kind of get away with it if it were in the middle, but it's not. The sub is canceling right at 60. The mid bass is canceling right at 80. This whole area is quite literally screwed. And I know you're gonna say, oh, but Nick, there's more output here in the subwoofer than there is in the mid bass. The crossover could be fine. Again, you're forgetting that the phase response here is also completely lost. It's not there to work with. There is no, again, we can create the like perfect, we can do this. We can go rear sub before. We can go in and we can match this thing perfectly and create the perfect acoustic response. It does not fix the absolute fuckery that is the phase response going on here. Same thing with the left mid bass. Let's see what I did here. Sure, perfect. Let's see what 80 hertz to 600. That's what my crossovers were. And sure enough, we can kind of get this cancellation out of here as far as frequency response goes. But the phase response is still completely boned. Now let's go to another car so I can show you Jeff's measurements. This is the RAM. Let me see. Hold on, let me just get rid of this. This is the RAM 1500. This is the one that I made the video on, the audio control amplifier and how, the subsonic filters in them are absolutely, make them pretty much useless for our situations where we care about accurate reproduction. Sorry, just checking to see if I'm still recording. All right, everything's going good. Let's get rid of the rear sub for a second. Let's look at left and right mid bass. Left mid bass being the brown trace, right mid bass being this turquoise trace. Sure enough, again, we have this nasty cancellation and really nasty cancellation. You know, this is in a truck that is much wider than my Volvo, so that cancellation is going to happen lower in frequency, but we see it again right here. Now, American trucks are also notorious, or actually most trucks in general, are notorious for these cancellations up here, these crazy frequency responses up here as well. But again, not for, we're concerned about 100 hertz and down for this video. Again, passenger mid-bass is fine. Driver mid-bass, totally screwed. In order to get something decent out of this, we have this cancellation at, that's the right one. We have this cancellation again at 70 and 50, and you know, it's just nasty. Now, let's look at the rear sub. I know I didn't get a different measurement with like a higher crossover point, but we can still see this nasty dip that is right at 100 hertz. Now, this is a situation where it's a little bit better than my car because, again, it's still allowing like some sort of crossover to happen, but these cancellations are still way too close to the crossover for comfort to get a proper phase response or proper phase cohesion through the crossover. It's just too close for comfort. You know, they're still within half an octave of each other. It's just, or half an octave of the crossover, or even closer. It's not going to work. And this is a customer who eventually went with a front subwoofer, and I have those measurements right here. Now let's see. And I forgot to open them. So this was the rear subwoofer before. I did the mid-ranges over again. That's why I measured those first on this date. Subwoofer also changed this day. Same with the amplifier, so that's why that was measured first. This is the rear subwoofer before any equalization. Again, we have a rising response, but then we get cancellation in the exact same areas. It's not, you know, if we take that, I tried holding my hand up like you guys are seeing that. If we cut this off like this previous measurement where the subsonic filter was applied, and we just focus on everything from like, you know, 40 hertz and above, it's pretty much the same response. You know, it's rising and then it falls off and we have these cancellations here. I know it's hard to see because it's in the middle of the crossover, and it's smoothed out. But, you know, we do have these cancellations here. Now, let me smooth this out again, just so it's easier to see what's going on. Now again, let's see, left mid bass. This is with EQ applied, because this was a day that I came back and kind of just redid the subwoofer. Now front sub, again, there's no cancellation here. Where is, hold on one second, 10.9. Give me 1 second. Let me download his file from the day that I did the initial measurements of the front subwoofer. That was on the 31st. Measurements 2, measurements 1. All right, let's see. So front sub, okay, and rear sub. Cancellation, we actually have a cancellation here too, but we don't know what this is caused by. And we have, where is left mid bass, and sure enough, we have cancellation, but on the front sub, we don't have cancellation in this area. It's just here to fill in this crossover in a way that doesn't have a non-minimum phase area, you know, where there's no complete phase destruction. Now again, let's compare it to Jeffrey's measurements. Let me go to the correct one. This is both. So here we have left mid bass and subwoofer phase response. And then we have left subwoofer frequency response after EQ. We have left mid-bass frequency response before and after EQ. Dark blue is before EQ, light blue is after EQ. Still has this crazy dip up in the 150 hertz area. Like I said, trucks, there's nothing you could do about that. But you could see he did fix the frequency response. Everything was kind of okay, and it's crossed over at 80, like 85 pretty well as far as the frequency response is concerned. But look up here. Let's look at this phase response. We do not have matching phase between subwoofer and mid-bass no matter what. In order to get this fixed, you'd have to start throwing all-pass filters at it, at the subwoofer, in order to match these extra phase wraps of the mid-bass driver. But here's the thing. This is one of those cases where people say, oh, all-pass filters aren't really a Band-Aid for, improper installation or stuff like this. This is the exact case for something like that. An all-pass filter on the subwoofer might match up the phase response on this graph, but at the end of the day, this phase response only exists because this measurement system is having trouble measuring phase in the first place. It doesn't really know what's going on here, and we can actually see that in another measurement. This is in the RAM also. We can see right here what happens. This is actually okay. So maybe this wasn't a RAM. I don't remember which car this is. I think it is a RAM. But this one I know for a fact is the RAM, especially because we could look at the frequency response and it matches the one I did perfectly. But look what happens. So we have the green being the before frequency response. We have the yellow being the after frequency response. Looks pretty decently correct. Look at the phase response. This measurement system has no idea what's going on with phase because, again, there's nothing to read there. It doesn't exist. There is no getting this signal in phase. It is not possible. There's nothing you can do. There's no argument you can throw at this. It's like saying, I'm gonna bring this guy Bob back from the dead, but Bob never existed. You can't bring something back from the dead if it doesn't exist. And that's exactly what's sort of going on here. These cancellations you cannot fix. You cannot blend and integrate and get proper phase cohesion with this type of setup. And that's exactly, again, what the point of a front subwoofer is. And we can see here, this is the same truck. We can see the green phase response is the subwoofer, which you can see right here. The red being the right, the passenger side mid-bass. We can see they follow pretty closely through the crossover area, which is 80 hertz. They follow pretty closely. Maybe some work could have been done to get this a little bit tighter, but this discrepancy right here isn't that bad. But look at the driver's side. Look at the left mid-bass. There's 2 extra phase wraps here. And with crazy dips and weirdness going on here, you are not getting proper phase cohesion no matter what you do. You can apply all-pass filters on the right mid-bass and on the subwoofer to match these phase wraps. Again, this is going to be one of those situations where it looks good on the graph, but it doesn't actually do anything beneficial. It's just not possible. So yeah, it's just, again, here's another one. This is a perfect example. We have sub right here, big cancellation in the 70 to 100 hertz area. And then on the driver's side, mid-bass, huge cancellation right in the mid-bass. There's nothing you can do. This was a big truck also, actually an even bigger truck. That's why the horrible frequency response from 120 hertz and above, which again is typical of trucks. But again, there's no blending this. There is no tuning in the world that is going to fix any of this. And it doesn't have to do with just resonance. It doesn't have to do with, tuning it is harder. By the way, it's not. it purely just has to do with how the cabin and how the speaker interacts with the cabin in that specific location. It's that simple. And again, Aaron has a video on this. There's Peter has videos on this. I don't know how in 2024, this late into 2024, like how people aren't realizing this. There's plenty of content. There's plenty of people talking about this and explaining why, with data, why a front subwoofer is, beneficial. I also saw a discussion kind of recently on one of the Facebook groups that related to this, and it was a bunch of old school competitors talking, oh yeah, these guys using front subs, they just don't know what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. But it's all the same people that I know for a fact don't understand data, don't know how to tune very well, or like take 500 hours of experimentation to end up with a decent sounding system. Meanwhile, we're able to tune a car in an hour and it sounds better than 99% of what most of these people are doing. And again, it's pretty simple. You're not going to beat physics. That's all this is. Simple physics. It's acoustics. You're not going to beat it. So let's put this to rest. A front sub is not for added output. I mean, you do get added output because more cone area in that. Actually, let's talk about that for a second. So again, usually in a standard system where you have just a rear subwoofer and then your front stage, whether it's a 3-way or 2-way, 99% of the time, unless you have a really small subwoofer, let's just take an average normal car audio system. 99% of the time, the mid-bass driver itself is going to be the weak link as far as output goes. And this is because it runs out of excursion, number one. Number two, doors usually start freaking out. Let's just focus on the running out of excursion part. If you add a front sub, instead of crossing your mid-bass over at 60, 70, 80 hertz, you can now cross it over at 100, 110, 120. I've done cars where I've crossed as high as 150 because of, just why not? And you still get X. By the way, for anyone who is going to probably try to nitpick that comment, I fucking guarantee you'd never know they were crossed that high. So shut up. Anyways, you can raise that crossover, reduce the amount of excursion out of that mid-bass driver, and all of a sudden you have much more mechanical power handling out of that situation. It's usually not the power handling thermally that's the problem. It's usually the mechanical limits of the driver when you're crossing it over at 80 hertz where it's giving up steam before anything else in the system. Introduce a front sub. Now, a front sub in the passenger footwell location gets insane cabin gain in this area that we need it, from like 40 hertz to 100 hertz, gets insane cabin gain in that area. And you can cross it over pretty high. You can raise the crossover in your mid-bass drivers. Now you have much more mechanical power handling out of it, and you can get so much more volume for nothing, just by doing a front sub. So not only did you get a much more phase coherent system, you also can now easily, I'm talking easily, gain 6 to 8 dB out of the system's capability, easily. As long as you do this correctly, I'd say 6 dB comfortably. In most cases, sometimes even more. And this is what allows a lot of these modern systems that are doing really good, but with otherwise relatively simple-ish looking systems, to do really well, sound really well, number one, but number two, have insane amounts of output. Cars like mine, cars like Luke's, cars like Chris Pierce's, cars like Miguel's. Miguel's car is so goddamn loud and it keeps perfect composure the entire way up. It is the loudest sound quality car I have ever heard in my entire career, and it keeps perfect composure all the way up. And it doesn't do that, with mid-bass drivers. It does that with a front. I mean, it has mid-bass drivers, obviously, but it has a front sub. He's not crossing those mid-bass drivers at, 60, 70, 80 hertz. He's crossing them higher than that, and he's letting the front sub take that over. You're not, there literally is no argument for not doing a front subwoofer unless you quite literally cannot fit it. You are quite literally incapable of the fabrication, or there's some other specific issue that you may have, whether it's amplifier channels, processing channels, budget. But just to, removing all of that off the table to say, oh, if you can't, if your car system isn't sounding good and you can't get your front, or your bass sounding like it's up front without a front sub, like you can't tune. That is so fucking ignorant and quite honestly kind of like disrespectful to people that can tune. It's not that, again, to summarize, it's not that you can't get it up front. It's you quite literally just can't phase align. It's not possible. So I think that's the end of my video. I don't know if I think of anything else. I'll start recording again and I'll add it on. But if you have any thoughts, if you have any comments, leave them below. If you think you don't need a front subwoofer in most applications in order to have good phase cohesion between your rear subwoofer and front mid-bass drivers, don't bother to leave your comments below, because frankly, I don't care and you're just flat out wrong. I really, I'm so sick of being, pleasant, I guess we could say, when there's so much bad information and so many of my customers are getting misled by people on the internet that just don't know, don't have firsthand experience, and don't even do their own tuning, but talk about tuning as if they do. So yeah, I'm starting to get a little annoyed with it. And, mostly because, again, like, my customers are taking a hit. Again, let's go back to Vlad with his RAM from the audio control amplifier video. That dude could have saved, if as long as he got the right guidance from me in the beginning, he could have saved himself $5,000 to $6,000 and had a much better sound system and had it done much quicker. Just because he followed random people on the internet before he found me. It's, really sad and unfortunate. So, I don't know. Like I said, leave your thoughts below, leave your experiences below. But, if you're going to leave a comment that says something ignorant along the lines of, that disagrees with this, bring some fucking data. Make a video and show me why I am wrong on this. Show me some phase responses of various different vehicles and, how, oh no, this is okay. Like, we can get these to blend. Let's see it. I promise you, it's all of the comments that disagree with this. I promise you, it's just going to be words. There's going to be no one on any of the Facebook posts or forum posts that relate to this video that are going to be able to back it up with actual data. They're just going to talk the talk, but they're not going to be able to back it up. So I think that summarizes it. I will see you guys later and probably have another controversial video within another couple of days. So stay tuned. Thank you for watching and enjoy.